This episode is brought to you by the Arvada Center. After a chance meeting, a forbidden romance is ignited between two young lovers. Romeo and Juliet manage to forge a connection across enemy lines. This contemporary take on the timeless love story focuses on the price that the young pay in cycles of violence. Despite the unending feud between their families, they will risk everything to be together. Experience this retelling of Shakespeare's enduring tragedy, Romeo and Juliet, playing February 13th through May 29th at the Arvada Center. Tickets are available now at arvadacenter.org. That's arvadacenter.org. This episode is brought to you by South by Southwest. Ready for discovery? South by Southwest 2026 takes over Austin, Texas this March 12th through the 18th. Expect the unexpected, where innovation, film and TV, music, and culture collide. Hear from global thought leaders, experience unforgettable screenings, and catch your future favorite artist all in 1 week. The 2026 South by Southwest conferences and festivals are a citywide experience built on curiosity and connection that you won't want to miss. Unlock a 10% discount on your innovation badge when you use code CityCast10 at sxsw.com/Denver. Discount on badge price only, not combinable. Terms apply. Start planning your adventure today.
Today on CityCast Denver, it's time for another big fight about RTD. Because Mayor Johnson and Governor Polis's big plans for the future rely on it. Because hundreds of thousands of Denverites need it to get to work on time. And because the agency has been struggling. So, as a big new reform proposal heads to the state legislature today, I'm talking to two of the people behind it about how they think RTD got into this mess and how their big idea is supposed to help. Today is Wednesday, February 4th. I'm Paul Caroli, and here's what Denver's talking about. All right, welcome to CityCast Denver. We're talking about RTD, one of my favorite topics, because it's time to fight about it again. There's a big proposal from a committee. The legislature last year set up this thing. A bunch of people came together. How are we going to fix RTD? That was the assignment. And now it's time. There is a report, and I have two esteemed members of this committee, the chair and vice chair. Chair Maria Garcia-Berry, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thank you.
And Vice Chair Jamie Lewis, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm so flattered and honored to have both of you. Both people I've wanted to talk to for years, I think, and this is a great opportunity. Was it the governor that appointed you two to this committee, or was it the legislature?
The governor appointed me.
Okay, and then Jamie?
I was appointed by the legislature.
Okay. So that is going to be important because what you all have produced is a report with a series of proposals for how to, I would say, radically reform how RTD works. But this has been a process of research and talking to a lot of people. And I think I want to start where you all probably started, which is, what even is the problem? Because when you talk about RTD, everyone has a different idea of what the problem is. So what do you define the problem as, like as a committee? How did you do this and what is it? Maria?
So from my end, I did not start where we ended up when we started the process. I mean, this was a very intense process for 180 days, 120 days. Most of us were appointed by August, and we had to start meeting then. We've put in an enormous amount of work and effort, all 15 members, whether we all agree and ended up at the right place. Everybody showed up. Nobody was missing in action, right? Some board member under extreme circumstances kept coming and participating. And I think that that was really important. I think for me, what I found, and I had heard all these rumors that, RTD can't be trusted. I mean, I have a long history with the district. I was on the original appointed board in 1977 and through 1979.
Before they reformed it in 1980 to be the current 15-member representative
We were
board.
a 21-member board. I grew up in Adams County. I was appointed by the Board of County Commissioners in Adams County, ratified by the municipalities in Adams County. That's how I got on the board. And then it was a 21-member board. Denver had 10 seats on the board, so it was very clear as to who was in charge of the district.
Did anyone propose just going back to that?
No. No, there was a proposal to keep the 15-member board and then add 3 appointed board members, which we did not think that would be That would mean that in our view, that would mean that the appointed people would probably be treated as stepchildren, right? In the board. I think our issue is leadership and governance. I think the what has happened with the district, and listen, all members of the RTD board now, some of them which are good friends of mine. I'm relatively a good friend of the new chair, Patrick O'Keefe. We've known each other for a very long time. He and I have slugged through the National Western because he was the project manager for the city on that. So we have known each other for a very long time. They're all very well-meaning, very hardworking board members. I think the problem is they don't jive as an institution. They don't work. They don't have a shared vision. They don't have an ability at times to recognize even what the problem is. I think the number one problem we have is ridership, right? If you cannot, what else is RTD left to, what is the number one mission of RTD? If you go back to the 1969 legislation, it was very robust, ambitious legislative declaration, but the number one thing you needed to do is to get ridership. RTD existed because the Denver Transit Company went bankrupt in 1967, and Bill McNichol stepped in to take over and told the legislature, you have to fix it and we have to create a public entity in order to do that. And I think the lack of consistent vision and having both a short-term and a long-term view as to how we're going to get ridership, what we have to entertain, is dramatic. And I think what we learned is that there are some strong skill sets that are missing on the board. I mean, in an elected board, you can't guarantee who's going to win, right? So you can't sit down and say, well, this guy is running because his expertise is finance and we should only have the finance slot and only people who are finance people can run for that board. That's not the way elections work. I also like to point out that RTD is an outlier. There are 3,000 transit agencies in the country. How many have elected boards? Guess.
Well, I read your report, so I have a good guess, but go ahead.
It's 3.
Yes.
It's 3. It's BART, it's the one in Oakland, and it's RTD being the largest. So it's not usual and customary that the transportation districts are elected in that aspect. And I think what this will do, and I think Jamie has a good way of putting the appointed boards. We think the appointed board should be treated like at-large members, which actually in the original RTD board, the board selected 2 at-large members who were appointed also by the board also. And I think that's what it does. It will give a more broader vision of all the challenges that's happening in Lone Tree, that's happening in Longmont, that's happening in Lakewood, that's happening in the city and county of Denver, to be able to work it. But I think the biggest issue is leadership and being able to work together to form a common vision in concert with the state, in concert with local governments.
Interesting. So sorry, just one last quick. There's three other transit agencies that have elected boards like this. Are there any that have hybrid boards like the ones you're proposing?
No.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Almost every board, transit board, is in some way an elected board. In fact, if you go to Oregon, which we tend to mold ourselves a lot after Portland and after all of that, in 2019, the last elected board, the only elected board in Oregon, which is Salem, and the name escapes me. I'll get it to you. I'll text it to you. But it's in Salem. The legislature turned it from an elected board into an appointed board.
Interesting.
Because Portland and Eugene are both elected boards, and they did that. So yeah, we're. I think most people think, oh, this is how you do transit nationwide. This is not how you do transit nationwide.
Huh. So Jamie, this is interesting because you have experience on the RTD board.
Correct. In 2024, Mayor Johnston asked me to fill in for a vacancy. There was a board member who fell ill. So I was already working in the discipline, so I was able to, roll right in. Excuse the pun, but
listeners might not know, but you use a wheelchair.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was able to roll right in without any learning curve. So we had a pretty productive year.
But did you come away from that experience thinking this whole institution is broken?
No. I think RTD does a lot of great things. We're still serving about 200,000 people a day. We're one of the largest geographic transit agencies in the country. I'm going to take more of a broader vision, like a 30,000-foot vision of what's happening, is that, the legislature chartered the RTD board back in 78,
69.
And they didn't really participate much. In fact, it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago that they started providing funding for transit here in Colorado. For years, we ranked like 47th, 48th in the nation as far as state contributing to RTD. And I think that's where I think the RTD had become so independent then when the state started providing money and putting strings on those monies, saying we want this and we want that. I think that's where things kind of broke down. So to me, what I think this report does, it gets RTD to a certain level so the expectations are even between the region, the state, and RTD. I think the work that Maria and I have done is going to bring those three entities together, and that's actually pointed out in the report about better relationships with our regional partners.
There's a couple of big themes here, I think, with this proposal that we have to get to. One of which, your colleague on the committee, the only RTD current director on the committee, Matthew Larson, he brings this up. He gave a quote to the Denver Post when you all announced this report last week. He said, he wrote in a dissenting report, he said that, in fact, we should be pursuing instead prudent and incremental changes that address specific real weaknesses rather than a radical reconfiguration that voters did not ask for and that increases the risk of disenfranchising large portions of RTD's riders, potential riders, and taxpayers.
If the potential was there for RTD to do that, they would have done it already. The problem is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. You know what the answer is. It's called insanity.
Well, yeah, but there's a million things you could have proposed, There's different changes. There's also just like money itself. One of the things that I've learned about RTD in the last 6 months of digging into this is there's a huge budget deficit from all this deferred maintenance, and there's no more big pot of money coming. Like, you could have proposed that the legislature increase taxes.
No. First of all, there's only been 2 elections that have been successful that RTD has had to raise taxes. The first one in 1973. The second one is in 2004. They debruced last year, but that was not raising taxes. And your ballot question will say without raising taxes. I think that...
Personally, I think that's semantics. I think saying debrucing, talking about Tabor tinkering, if the state is keeping more money, that's raising taxes.
That is a very legitimate opinion to have, but the bottom line is that RTD did debruce successfully and very well. As someone who has done a lot of research over the years outside of the confines of RTD about RTD, I think the biggest issue that you have to do to get voters to vote for you a tax increase is trust. And I don't think RTD has that trust. When your ridership is down so dramatically and you have not recuperated from the pandemic like other cities have done, okay?
Yes,
Salt
agreed.
Lake being our peer. Salt Lake's a conservative city in a very red state and has a very robust transit system in the middle of Salt Lake City, the middle of the state, right? And they're similar to us in the sense that both Utah and Colorado are metrocentric states where the majority of the population is in the metropolitan area around the capital. So I think that you can't just go out you can't go out and because of Tabor, whether you like it or not, but the reality of life is you're going to make a decision to go out to the ballot. You have to be comfortable that there's enough trust and faith that the voters are going to trust you. Because if you fail, okay, it'll take you another 5 or 6 years to get back on the ballot again, and you're going to now have to do all that work over again. That's what happened with Guide the Ride. Guide the Ride went down dramatically, okay? It took from 1997, okay, to 2004 for the district to build that trust, to do that work, to go back out on the ballot, okay, to be able to do it. Matt had a lot of ideas on our committee, was very active. Was his proposal, one of his proposals was to add 3 appointed members of expertise to the 15-member board, okay? Where I would quibble with him. I don't think these are radical changes. If you look at transit throughout the country, going back to an appointed board, RTD started as an appointed board, okay, to be able to do it. I was there in 1980 when Miller Hudson and Jack McCroskey proposed the legislation to do that. Keep in mind that how RTD became an elected board was not by a board of the voters in the district. It was statewide. So people in Grand Junction and Colorado Springs voted on this. Why would they care? okay? Because there was no mechanism for RTD to have initiative and referendum within its districts. The legislature never granted that power to RTD. So I think we all have to also dissect how RTD became, okay, an elected board, in the sense that it was not a vote of, do you really think people in Grand Junction, Colorado go to bed at night thinking whether RTD had to be an appointed or elected board?
No, I don't think literally anyone thinks this.
That's right.
I think people are probably hearing this proposal and thinking, how is this possibly going to affect me at all?
Right. And I think what we do by having 5 districts that are elected, they'll be bigger districts, they'll be broader, they'll be comparable to a county commissioner in Jefferson County in terms of the size of population. Then you're, like in Jefferson County, you live in a district, but you are voted at large, which means that you always have to have an at-large view of the problems of Jefferson County. Counter that with El Paso, which is 5 districts. If you live in the southern part, do you really care whether Buc-ee's goes into your county or not? Right?
Who should draw these districts?
I actually think, given the fact that we have a history of the Reapportionment Commission being run by the Colorado Legislative Council, which is a nonpartisan entity, they have always staffed the reapportionment, because the legislature has to go through a commission. Congressional districts have to go through a commission.
Yeah, the independent.
That's all done by staffing of Colorado Legislative Council.
Okay.
I think RTD absolutely has to be part of it, because I think transit corridors and how that goes ought to be taken into play. But there's all kinds of laws you have to put in play as that you have to be cognizant about. And I think the Colorado Legislative Council ought to be part and parcel of being part of that.
Okay, interesting. That's going to matter a lot to a small number of people. I want to go back to the big question that I just posed a second ago. The everyday person that just uses the bus, the single mother that is sick and tired of having a bus drive past her stop and missing work or missing her kid's soccer game. How is this very esoteric change going to affect her, Jamie?
Well, one of the issues that we were trying to attract was getting people who had specific skills in what we call challenging communities, whether that be BIPOC, Latino, the disability community. And we want more diversity on the board. Right now, we have these elections. Half the time, the ballot doesn't even have candidates on them. At one time, we were letting people write in. I mean, that's how bad it was. We weren't getting that skill set that we felt that would move the needle forward. So by having a appointed board, we're going to be looking for people in the industry to use those skills in order to improve safety. Safety is one of the biggest things for people today, whether that be the bus driver or whether it be the rider. Now, having said that, there's been a fantastic increase in safety in the last 2 years. The RTD has built up a police department, and they're actually being seen. They're on the train, they're on the bus. So the amount of incidences have gone down drastically. So that would be one example, is making sure that safety continues to grow.
This episode is brought to you by MultiPass. Proudly based in Denver and deeply rooted in the local event and creative scene, MultiPass is designed with both event producers and attendees in mind. Want to go to a cool comedy show, see an up-and-coming musician, or take a fun yoga class? The MultiPass events calendar is full of great stuff to do. Meet other people who like the same stuff you do through its unique community chat feature, which unlocks once you RSVP. So you can buy tickets, make plans, and meet some new friends. MultiPass has revenue-sharing tools built in, which automatically splits ticket revenue between producers, performers, promoters, and solves cash flow issues with same-day payouts. MultiPass is designed to help everyone in the event ecosystem win, not just the platform. Learn more at multipass.com. That's multipass.com.
The safety question is interesting because I was talking to a legislator who's going to be debating this, and they made this point about how RTD has spent all this money bringing hiring cops, spending on security as an effort to create more ridership, make people more comfortable. But I don't know if other agencies are doing that in other places. Maybe you all saw this in your research, because I think the other thing that could create a feeling of safety is just more people using the bus, more frequent service, making it more appealing, and then you don't need to have more cops. Did that come up? Did you all see did the Salem or the Portland transit providers have as big of police forces as what we have?
I think probably they do. I think you may not see them as a parent, but I think of every metro system that when I travel, I use transit. Right, it's a good way to get around. Whether you go to New York, you go to Washington, whatever. Why rent a car? It's ridiculous.
And a lot of it's perception.
It's perception.
I just saw a survey, and they were interviewing people, and they were saying, and the people that trusted RTD the most and enjoyed the service were people that actually used the service every day. And then when they asked the people that don't use the service what they thought about RTD, and they had horrible things to say. So a lot of time it's people complaining because they see an incident on the television or hear it on the radio or a podcast, and they just blow it out of proportion. Now, I'm not saying things don't happen out there, but I think unfortunately RTD, the only time they get any news coverage is when it's negative.
Yeah,
so.
Bus arrives on time is not a headline.
Exactly.
No one's clicking on that story. Doesn't matter.
But bus not showing up is a headline.
Yeah.
Particularly if something has happened and it was critical that the bus show up.
And 17% of the time it doesn't show up right now. It's bad. Yeah. It's bad numbers.
And that is, I think, the real barrier, right? Safety and the fact that I've heard so many people. There was a event that I went to about 2 months ago where we had a roundtable on RTD, and you had business guys in downtown telling you, we're willing to pay a pass, we're willing to do whatever. Our employees' resistance of first of all, not a lot of them are super happy that they're all being back downtown, but now that they are back down, why aren't they using the bus? And the bus is because it's reliability. It's if they have kids, if they have to go to a kid's after school activity after work and they have to get there, how do they know? How are they going to trust it? That kind of trust has existed before in the district. So we have obviously the pandemic. Look, Deborah started here during the pandemic.
Deborah Johnson, CEO, and current general manager of RTD.
Current general manager, who's a very competent professional. All right, so she got here during the pandemic, and obviously the world shut down. But when you look at our peers and how they've recovered and we haven't, there has to be more more direction from the board that is your number one. I mean, I want board members to wake up in the morning and say, how am I going to get one more writer, in RTD today? I think that's important. There's some huge projects that are coming online. I listened to your podcast a couple of days ago. You guys talked a lot about the Colfax BRT. Mm-hmm. That is the singular most significant project, since either DUS or some of the fast tracks that's rubber tired that needs to succeed. If all of a sudden the headways are coming, but all of a sudden you're interlining with the 40 or the 30, and that bus doesn't show up, I listened very intently to that podcast because I actually believe that is a fabulous way for RTD to prove to the world that they can really move people and they can increase their ridership is the Colfax BRT. What their plans are, it's unclear, and how they're headed. But there are some projects here that are going to, if the Colfax BRT is not successful in attracting ridership, and getting more people on it, we will not be able to build the Colorado or the federal BRTs, which are very significant to moving people around the region.
It'll definitely be a benchmark. But I wanted to point out that this leads to another subject that we covered, and that was workforce.
Right.
And this is the biggest impact. And when you see a bus not show up, what is the reason? And the reason is because a bus driver didn't show up or a bus driver quit. We have a great ability to recruit drivers. The problem with RTD is retaining them. So there's a whole workforce there and environment that we're pushing RTD to change to make it more attractable for them to stay. One of the recommendations I just loved was possibly supplying childcare service. We'd love to get more people involved part-time working for RTD, working 4 hours, so it's not such a stressful stretch, working 8 hours. So there was a lot of small recommendations. It's all these little recommendations that build up RTD and make it more flexible, make it more pliable, and hopefully more people will get on the bus.
Lance, who is the head of the ATU, of the union, was amazing.
He's one of your colleagues on the committee?
On the
Okay.
committee, right. And he will tell you, I mean, they know the district really well. They know how hard it is to retain. I mean, it's not only just attracting, it's also retention. I think that's one of the things we learned. RTD can bring them in the door, but they don't necessarily stay.
Jamie
right?
was saying, and the safety is what I've heard on the buses. I've heard some other things too, though. I've heard some other things too about that, actually. Maybe, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about that. But we got to talk about disenfranchisement. That was Matt's other point. Matt Larson, in his dissenting report, he talked about disenfranchisement. I think that's a huge issue with this proposal because the governor appointed you, Maria. We know the governor is the reason why the state government has been so much more involved in RTD lately. He is obsessed with this density transportation, like land reform stuff. This is one of his big priorities. He's always resented RTD for not doing what he wants. Your proposal effectively gives him a ton more power, and that comes at the expense of voters. People are going to have less power to pick their representatives on RTD, and the governor is going to have way more. How is that going to increase trust?
So I'll take you out on that one because, first of all, up until this legislation passed, writing candidates were allowed. You had, 4 RTD board members who were writing in, of where less than 300 people voted? How's that democratic? How is that representing 220,000 people? First of all, I was appointed by the governor under a criteria. The legislation that was passed for the Accountability Committee laid out criteria. So the governor's appointments at tab. I filled the former board member slot. We are recommending in our recommendations that you have to have criteria. First of all, it won't be this governor that appoints. Because
I think some people will really appreciate hearing that. He's getting less and less popular every day.
Well, this governor will. I'm not gonna go there with you, but on that topic. But the bottom line is that this governor, the chances are that even if you put this together, it's going to take a couple of years. So it'll be the future governor that will do that. Second of all, we've got criteria that we're recommending in legislation, and third of all, it requires Senate confirmation. I didn't have to be confirmed by the Senate to be on this committee, but we are very strongly believe that is the other step to be able to do that. So I'm having a hard time when people say disenfranchising. I think Director Larson was very concerned about the disenfranchising of Denver. Okay, I don't see a scenario where Denver gets disenfranchised in any district that you draw, okay, by virtue of the fact that, first of all, we have no geographical criteria on the appointed. So because we want, as Jamie likes to say, we want the board members to know from the get-go that they're appointed, that they're at large, they're representing everybody, okay? You have to be aware of that. I think one of the problems that we've had in the district is that board members, and I've had some board members say to me, I represent 220,000 people. I don't think you represent 220,000 people. RTD can't work if the entire region is not talking to each other and working, because transportation you don't stop at the boundaries of one district. And I've worked in areas around the country on transit districts that stopped at county lines. And that becomes a real barrier. That doesn't happen here. That's why it was created as a 7-county, multi-county district, right? So you can't think that way. And I think that there are times, I think, that you have to guarantee that there's some expertise on the board. We made workforce somebody who's had experience negotiating labor contracts, et cetera, to be part of it. Because I think one of the things we learned is the biggest resource you've got at times, which is the union and the workforce, gets underutilized in terms of being consulting as to how they solve ridership.
So one of the issues we addressed with the 15-member board, it's not nimble enough to make decisions in a timely manner. So I kind of pushed back a little bit because we were sensitive to the electorate, and that's why we kept the 5 elected officials. We also talked about expanding the administrative support for those elected officials and appointed officials. Right now, there's an administration that supports the board of directors, but it's split between the staff and the board. So the elected board and the appointed board will have their own staff, which I kind of relate it to. I had to write Senator Hickenlooper recently about another issue. And I know he's never going to read it. I know his staff is going to read it.
Yeah,
and they're going to refer it to the professional or the person who can change that question. So we're hoping that, when people say, oh, 220,000, 300,000 people, how can they represent that? They're going to have a better staff to be able to respond to people. Getting back to the 4 appointed, we still feel there's specific skill sets that we want to be a requirement, like we said, somebody representing the BIPOC community, somebody representing the disability community, specific skills. And unless those skill sets are met, the governor can't appoint unless those skill sets are filled. So again, like Maria says, the current governor will more than likely not be involved in this decision. And somebody brought this up at our meeting. Any governor who would not support transit would have to be an idiot. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it addresses so many different issues. It addresses the general workforce. Do we know how many people use the bus to get to work? It gets people to health care. It gets people to the Denver Bronco game. It just does so many things. It relieves congestion on the highways. Therefore, you don't have to spend as much money. It cuts down on pollution. So if a governor came in and said, I don't like transportation, he would have to be the biggest idiot in the world, because transit is one of the lifebloods of this community, this whole region.
I agree with you, but I think different governors are going to have different opinions about what to do with transit. Like, I think a lot of people, when they see this proposal, they're going to think, well, if we empower Governor Polis, isn't he just going to pilfer RTD's coffers and spend money to build his train to Boulder or the Front Range passenger rail? We all know that's what he wants. He's been talking about it for years.
The board is still independent. It's still an independent body.
But if 4 of them go against him, he'll just say, okay, I'm going to appoint someone else.
You're
done.
No, he can't.
Yeah, that's like a litmus test saying, I'm only going to appoint you if you support Front Range Rail. That's going to really narrow down the list, I would say. So again, I think any decent governor is going to look at this holistically and say, what is best for transportation in the core area? And that's where a lot of people are saying, the transportation, the consistency, the on-time performance has to increase in the core area.
Look, whether you like it or not, and some people would say, well, that was a mistake that we made in fast tracks, and maybe it was, and we ought to think about it.
And just so people don't know, you're talking about the campaign
you led
in
2004,
that voters evenally approved to increase taxes to pay for, among other things, the train to Boulder.
Correct.
That was then never built.
That's correct. But there are taxpayers in the northern part of the district that have been paying their taxes and have not gotten what they thought they were going to get. Let me give you an example. Let's not talk Boulder. Let's talk Broomfield. Go talk to the mayor of Broomfield. Go talk to a couple of the council people in Broomfield who have thought about de-annexing themselves from RTD. Because they don't think they get anything for their constituents out of it. That's a legitimate issue, Paul. Okay? So we're not talking about Polis's train to Boulder. First of all, the train to Longmont was always in the RTD plan. Okay? And it was promised. Mistakes were made. Assumptions were made that were probably erroneous now 21, 22 years later, and as to why that train is not materialized. And there are some significant lessons learned, okay, that are happening that need to be taken from that, okay? But to just sort of poo-poo that and not recognize that area of the region has been paying taxes for a long time, okay, and have not gotten the service they were promised, which leads the people like Broomfield. I was at the Colorado County's Front Range Commissioners meeting where Heidi, who is on the thing, we have had serious discussions about how do we de-annex, because we'll maybe provide our own service. Longmont does now do contracting with entities outside of the RTD district in order to provide that, which they do on their own dime. So let's not just poo-poo this as, Polis is trained to Boulder. This is a reality of life, is that local governments made planning, zoning, and land use decisions based on the fact that they were going to have, a train available at some point. There hasn't been an alternative proposed to them that is maybe appropriate to take care of what they thought their needs were going to be. And that's what happened. A lot of communities made decisions for land use purposes, which is what the power of the local government is, based on the fact that they were going to get trains. So I think we need to be very cognizant of that because I think it's important. And it's important if all of a sudden RTD, where I disagree with Director Larson, is I don't think we have incremental time. I think if we don't fix RTD's issues within the next 2 or 3 years, RTD will start getting cannibalized by local governments to say we want out or we want to create our own system. 10 years ago, there was a discussion of whether Arapahoe and Douglas should go do their own RTA and get out of RTD. Those are discussions that have been legitimately being undertaken by local governments around the region when they didn't think RTD was providing the service that they needed. So I think we're at a state of urgency in order to meet workforce, to meet affordability quotients in this region. We are an expensive state. We know that. Okay, and to meet housing goals. And if we don't have a robust and integrated transportation system, we're not going to meet those requirements that we need in order for us to continue growing.
I totally see why this is why you would make this proposal based on that fear. But I think there's also going to be Denverites hearing this thinking, let them go. You know,
do you think the average Denverite knows who his RTD district is?
No, I don't think so at all. But
do you think they care?
I think they care when they think about where they can get to on public transit. Because our whole system is designed for the suburbs because of this diffracted board.
I would take you up on that also. I have to tell you, I live in East Denver. You know what's the hardest for me to get to? The A-line.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay,
I live in the city, yeah.
So I would totally disagree with you. And for me to go to Aurora to take the R train to interline with the A-line takes me about an hour and 30 minutes longer. Okay, so I would say that there's a whole lot of part of Denver at times who's not getting enough adequate service internally. That's
what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. The internal Denver service. Like those people will be like, Jefferson County, go off, do your own thing. We'll do our own thing. We'll increase bus frequency. We'll increase reliability here inside the city.
But that's not the way transportation works. What are you going to do? Then Denver's going to run its own system. And then at the county line, you're going to have to stop and get a new bus to get on Jefferson County. That's what happens. Well, I can tell you, right. I worked in the Tampa Bay area. That's what happened. You can't get from Pinellas to Hillsborough unless you change buses. Okay, so is that the way you want it to do? We're an integrated system. The reason RTD was created is to have a holistic 7-county RTD system so that when you get on a bus, you can go all over the district. So the solution is none of that. And I would argue, the suburbs would totally tell you that this system was not built for them, that the system was really built for Denver. So I think it's an issue.
I guess everyone kind of feels that way.
Yeah, but that's inherently the problem.
And that's the problem.
That is the problem.
Okay, well, this is the start of the fight. Like I said, it's coming to the legislature this session. This proposal is going to lead to a bill, and there's going to be a lot of debates about it. So listeners, here's what I want. I want to know what you think. Call in, text, let us know what you think. If you're a daily RTD user, if you're just someone who has a big opinion about it, I want to hear from all of you. 720-500-5418. Leave us a text, leave us a voicemail with your name and neighborhood. Maybe Maria and Jamie will have you back on to talk about some of that as this whole thing develops. I'm so curious where it's going to end up. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell Denver State Senator and Transportation Committee member Matt Ball about us. Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. Thanks to all the new neighbors who just joined the membership program. You too can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Denver neighbor today at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you then.
Did you know CityCast Denver has a perks program? Every week, we're highlighting some standout deals from our favorite businesses in town to help you support local and save some money. It's a win-win. Here are some highlights from this week. Check out Meow Wolf's Adultiverse Space Rodeo on January 17th and experience the worlds of Meow Wolf Denver transformed into a 21 and up psychedelic party. Saddle up for an intergalactic adventure. Just use code GIDDYUP for $4.20 off an Adultiverse ticket. Offer available for redemption now through January 17th. Or what about Topo Designs? Just visit a Topo Designs retail store and mention this ad to receive 20% off your purchase. Some exclusions apply. Valid until February 1st. Looking for some fun? Check out Green Door and pre-order a curated cannabis box for your Denver trip. Includes edibles, snacks, and local accessories, ready for pickup near your stay. No stress, no lines, just a better trip. Use code DenverPerk for $10 off any experience box. To see a full list of participating businesses, just visit denver.citycast.fm/perks. It's a great way to check out new restaurants, shops, and events in the Mile High City without breaking your budget. And I love that for you.